Welcome back, guys. Today, you're going to take Cornell notes on this man, Napoleon, and who arguably saved France. The man that comes to power after the French Revolution ends. The Directory is set up. It's failing miserably. France is on the verge of collapse. And then this little individual right here comes about and saves the day. So at the end of this PowerPoint, you should be able to trace the development and reign of Napoleon. So how did he come to power? What happened when he was in power? How did it end? All right. So we're going to go over a couple of things. We're going to go over his early military success, which is how he gains his fame, his coming to rule in France, what happens once he's in charge, 3 major mistakes that he makes, and the fact that he gets banished not once, but twice. So, first, who was Napoleon? Napoleon, born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. So here's France right here. Napoleon, the man that comes to save France, isn't even from the mainland of France. He's a short guy, 5'3". 5'3", big personality though. Big personality, knew how to command people, knew how to garner and get people's attention, knew how to lead. He always was very good at getting people to follow him. And he's considered one of the greatest military leaders of all time. He goes on to conquer most of Europe and then some. We're going to talk about that. Now, his successes and his coup d'etat, his coming to power. 1795, rebels march to the National Convention, unhappy with the way that France is being run after the revolution. Napoleon and his gunners are successful. He's able to force them to flee, gets them away, force them to panic. He becomes viewed as a hero because he was the one in charge that stopped this potential revolution to the revolution. And so he's viewed as a hero in France. He gets, as a result, he's named the leader of the French army against Austria and Sardinia. Again, these are 2 countries that were working to try and reinstall the monarchy in France. Austria is very upset. France had beheaded Marie Antoinette, who was a member of the royal family there. So they're at war. They're going to war. Napoleon's in charge. He goes into Italy, completely wipes them out. Wipes them out with what some would argue was more of a volunteer military than it was a professional one. He actually goes into Egypt, tries to have the repeat success, gets wiped. He loses horribly to Horatio Nelson, who gains fame from Great Britain because of his involvement in the American Revolution. But he goes to Egypt, fights against Horatio Nelson, gets defeated horribly, but manages to keep this information out of the newspaper. Pretty much by threatening everyone that works there. Like, if this gets out, I'm going to kill everybody. I'm going to kill you and your family. Like, no one is going to find out that I lost. So it gets swept under the rug. The fact that he lost is kept out of public knowledge, or kept from the public. It's not public knowledge. He's still viewed and looked at as a hero and savior. 1799, the Directory, the group that had taken over after the Reign of Terror, loses political confidence of the people. The people don't want the Directory to be in charge anymore. France is kind of in political limbo. There's no real direction that they are going. The people, upon his return from Egypt, urge him to go not only to become a political figure, but to go take that power. And he does that in what is known as a coup d'etat. And he sets up and becomes the first consul. He calls himself a consul. He rules as a dictator, but he doesn't call himself that. France just went through this whole revolution to get rid of dictators and monarchs. So he called himself a consul. And he's able to take this power through a coup d'etat, which is a French term for a sudden seizure of power or blow to the state. In this context, state meaning government. So he rolls in, takes that power away. People of France are extremely happy. And so his early military career, he's defeated by Horatio Nelson at the Battle of Nile in Egypt. He actually, when he comes home, he's viewed as this hero, but he actually abandons all of his troops in Egypt in an effort to get to the newspaper first, again, to make sure that his defeat doesn't come out. And so in the 1800s, he holds what he calls a plebiscite. It's a vote of the people. It didn't really matter how the vote went. Napoleon was going to do what he wanted to do, but Napoleon knew that by having this vote, it gave the perception that the people that he was ruling over had a say. And so he has this plebiscite. It's a vote of the people. It approves a new constitution, which gives all the real, actual power to Napoleon. And so instead of becoming a dictator, because he had this plebiscite and this vote, he was elected a dictator and could thus rule France how he wanted because all of the power was given to him through this vote. Again, it's kind of argumentative. Was it a fair vote? Did everyone actually vote that way? But he promises to keep many of the changes from the revolution. So he writes the economy. This is a big one. France is broke. France is going through a lot of trouble, a lot of war, a lot of fighting. But their government never really recovers from the economic problem. So goal number one for Napoleon is to fix the economic problem, and he creates a national banking system and a different way of tax collecting. And the first thing he does is fix the economy, and everything in history revolves around money. So he fixed the economy, he fixes France's money, he fixes people's money. This is a big deal. This is another way for him to gain more traction and a bigger following through politics or through economics. He signs an agreement with the Pope. He kind of fixes that relationship between the Catholic Church and France. Napoleon realizes the Catholic Church is still the biggest and the richest institution in the world, and fighting with them is not going to end well for anybody. So he influences the church, but there is a part of that concordat or agreement. Both sides agree that the church will have no say or power in governmental affairs. So again, he fixes the economy, gaining the power, the influence of the people. He fixes the relationship with the church, giving him another powerful ally. And then he creates the Napoleonic Code. It's a uniform set of laws that eliminates many injustices that are seen throughout France. The Napoleonic Code is very similar to Hammurabi's Code, which is a set of laws that you should have followed or learned about when you learned about Mesopotamia. An eye for an eye. If you stole, you got your hand cut off. The Napoleonic Code was the punishments were not as severe, but it does eliminate a lot of injustice and provide punishment for such injustices throughout France, trying to help eliminate crime. And so the Napoleonic Code divided civil law up. There was personal status, there was property, and then there was the acquisition, either discussing whether your property got stolen or whether you rightfully took it. The goal of the Napoleonic Code was to reform the legal system and thus reflect more of the ideologies of the French Revolution and create a uniform set of laws for France. That way, different parts of France didn't have different laws, and you had to worry about, is this a law in this part of France or not? And Napoleon goes to view himself as a godlike figure. Here you can see he's writing his code and being crowned by an angel. So this is just a painting that he had done that kind of represents or showcases how he viewed himself. And so his rule in France continues, and then again to showcase his power, he crowns himself emperor. In what is a very ceremonial process where the emperor goes and is crowned by the Pope. Charlemagne, another great leader of France, had done the exact same thing during the Middle Ages. But Napoleon believed that if the Pope had the power to crown me, then he also has the power to take that crown away. So Napoleon, in an effort to symbolically show that he had more power than the Pope, which again was his goal, he wanted to show that he was the most powerful man, not only in Europe, but in the whole world. He takes the crown from the Pope, places it on his own head, crowning himself emperor in a way to symbolize that the Pope cannot give nor take away his power. And again, you can see he has this picture painted of him. You can very well see that this is not 5'3" Napoleon. He wanted to paint himself in a much bigger, broader, grander scale. I mean, this is his hand right here, and his head's all the way here. So his shoulder would be somewhere around here. He's just not 5'3". You can see here how long his arm is, because here's his hand. Just this painting is not one of someone that is 5'3". Now, the biggest way that Napoleon is able to fix the economy in France is he sells a bunch of land in the Americas to Thomas Jefferson that France isn't really using. And it's known as the Louisiana Purchase. Instantly doubles the size of America. But all of this right here, he sells to Thomas Jefferson, which is ironic because Thomas Jefferson does it without government's approval, something that like he was very much about. No, you shouldn't be able to do things without government approval. Thomas Jefferson, in my mind, is the first modern politician. If I could go back in time, I really don't like TJ. If I could go back in time, I would just like love to just slap TJ one good time and then jump back in my time machine and come back to the day because they would probably instantly kill me right there on the spot. But back in time, slap TJ, he hits the ground, I jump in my time machine, I leave. But anyway, I digress. Napoleon sells Louisiana, which is all of this, the Louisiana Purchase, in what's known as the Louisiana Purchase, gets millions upon millions of dollars that go on to help correct and fix the French economy the way that it is. Hindsight being 2020, he sold it for like pennies an acre. So very, very undersold. But I guess Jefferson knew France needed money, and Americans were the only ones that were going to give it to him. But he does sell the Louisiana Purchase. And so he goes on to create the largest empire since the Roman Empire. The largest empire since the Roman Empire. He does this through conquest, conquering, warfare. But then he starts to get greedy. Makes a series of mistakes that ultimately lead to his downfall. And then he comes back. Then he has a downfall again. 2 downfalls. That's how important Napoleon was. He had a downfall twice. But this is where we're going to stop for the day. Louisiana Purchase, you now know that he goes on to ultimately create the largest empire since Rome. You have a reading on Canvas for today. It's a reading that's going to go more in-depth to Napoleon, how he comes to power, what he does once he's there. If you have any questions, reach out to me. And as always, have a great day.